Ready, 1.68 mil. 1.68 mil, set. Ready. Fire up.
On the Argentine positions, the artillery was falling like rain, drenching the mountains in debris and smoke. Once the Scots Guards had battled their way to the top of Tumbledown, the Gurkhas prepared to move through onto Sapper Hill, the last ridge, almost on the outskirts of Stanley itself. The helicopters, snuggling against the contours of the land, couldn't keep the ammunition coming fast enough. The final bombardment brought the guns down to their last half-dozen shells. But short of ammunition or not, the British shells kept falling remorselessly until the Argentine line broke. An Argentine cameraman showed what it looked like on the receiving end. The demoralized defenders were pulling back into the town. Officers and men were arguing. Discipline was breaking down. The British tactics were paying off. The appalling bombardment had been going on for weeks. The blockade, even partially enforced, had created a sense of isolation. The weather was turning nasty. There was nowhere else to retreat. The British were worried they might have to fight through the streets. Had the Argentines known that the British were on their last legs logistically, with the Navy almost unable to guarantee the supply line any longer, perhaps they would have fought on. Instead, suddenly it was all over. The guns fell silent.
Negotiations will commence this evening. However, you're reminded that at the moment we still remain at war.
We are still at war with Argentina.
And Camp Charlie Papa will continue to be furred.
And we'll still have cap.
Precautions against anything happening.
Normal anti-air precautions.
Argentina should be continued.
8-2, Roger, out. Negotiations will start tonight. Although there appears to be a ceasefire at the moment and the Argentinian forces in the Falklands have appeared to have surrendered, this does not necessarily mean that the forces in the mainland Argentine will necessarily stop fighting. Therefore, we will have normal cap, that is air cover, combat air patrols, and we should take the normal precautions against being caught by surprise or whatever. There is a white flag flying over Stanley. Very marvellous. Ciao Hajazle, Marty Jansa, cosine foco objective ma, wa Fugera.
Now their major had to explain to some rather disappointed Gurkhas that their chance for fighting and regimental glory was over. The troops began the dangerous march into Stanley, weaving their way through the minefields which surrounded it. They followed carefully in the tracks of the engineers, the men who'd led every assault, showing the advanced troops the way through the minefields under fire. So helter-skelter had been the final move forward that his troops were almost at Moody Brook, the Royal Marine Barracks on the outskirts of Port Stanley, before Brigadier Thompson of the Commander Brigade caught up with them.
I didn't think it would happen quite as fast as this. I expected this to be happening tomorrow and not today. But I'm delighted that it's happened today.
The real enemy defeated, there was time for some regimental rivalry.
Why, where did you put it up?
There on the race course. Hey, who's got up? Italian flag up on here, Dave.
Who was the first to put up the flag?
Para.
I put it up again. Para the first in again? That's right,
Yes,
again.
Para was first in.
How much did you beat the others?
2.5 hours.
So how long have you been here now?
Since about 3 o'clock. 2 off, 3 o'clock.
What sort of opposition was there?
Running opposition.
Running.
They ran away.
So you just came straight in?
Right.
And told to stop?
That's right.
How did
We
you-
went into the town, put up the 2 Para flags, the Union Jack, and then was dragged back out by the Marines.
Not feeling too good about that. What do you expect?
Argentine officers were allowed to keep sidearms to emphasize their authority, perhaps even to ensure their safety against their men. The surrender was unconditional in everything but name, because when the agreement was drawn up, General Menendez would not have the word unconditional in the final document.
In Downing Street, news of the Argentine surrender came as an enormous relief.
Prime Minister, could you have a word with us, please?
Mrs. Thatcher, just back from telling the Commons, was exuberant.
Here. Prime Minister, we have a microphone here.
It's just wonderful news. And it's Great Britain. Marvellous forces, every single one of them. It's just been everyone together. And that's what matters. We knew what we had to do. We knew what we had to do. And we went about it and did it.
Do you think the ceasefire will hold, Prime Minister?
I believe so. I believe so. There's still 1 or 2 things. Just listen to everyone. I must go down and talk to them.
Right. Off the carpet,
As Mrs. Thatcher savoured her moment of triumph with the crowds outside number 10, her opponents in Buenos Aires were getting a very different reception. General Galtieri had intended to address the crowds from the balcony of the presidential palace. But because of the anger and stream of abuse directed at the Argentine leadership, the president took the precaution of addressing the nation from the safety of a television studio, far from the noise and violence of the scenes outside. Right to the end, the Argentine people had been led to believe they were winning. It made the shock of defeat that much less bearable. 48 hours later, President Galtieri was president no more. The search for a successor was on.
The uncertainties in Buenos Aires were having their effect on the Falklands. The prisoners, more than 6,000 in Stanley, several thousands more around the islands, had nowhere to live, little food to eat. The British wanted to ship them home, but until someone was willing to accept defeat and guarantee a safe conduct, they had to stay on the islands. The prisoners were taken out to the squalor of the airfield and left amid the mud and debris to fend for themselves. Suddenly, the danger of men dying needlessly through exposure seemed very real. It was several days before Argentina was stable enough to strike a deal to bring them home. Despite the vigor and the confidence of the British troops, it was a close-run victory. The length of the supply line and the need to defend it strained the Navy greatly. It could have gone the other way. At the end, it was a case of whose nerve broke first. General Moore kept his, and kept to himself, any doubts about winning until the battle was over.
One has one's moments of doubt, and I would have thought that all human beings have their moments of doubt. One has to have the strength of character to overcome these moments of doubt. What I did not ever doubt was the quality of the man, and that happily I was right about.
When you found it was over, that you'd won, you've obviously had a lot still to do. What was your mood?
I think my mood was elation above everything else, that the whole thing was over, that we'd done the job we'd come here to do, that the sacrifices that had been made by a lot of young men, and as you know, in those final 3 days we had 173 casualties, had all been worthwhile, because the freedom of the Falkland Islanders to live the life they wanted, under the government they wanted, was restored, and that's what we come for. So it was a great sense of elation in that sense.